In the quiet dawn of the Renaissance, when Europe was waking from a long night of forgetfulness, a single mind began to shine like a morning star. A child born in a small village of Italy, who would grow to sketch the shape of human dreams. A boy who watched birds in the sky and imagined machines that could follow them. A young artist who looked at shadows, rivers, clouds, and saw secrets hidden in their movements. This is the story of Leonardo da Vinci, the painter, the thinker, the inventor of wonders. A man who searched not for fame, but for truth. A man whose curiosity had no end. Tonight we step gently into his world, where sketches breathe, ideas whisper, and imagination becomes a bridge between earth and sky. Rest easy now, and let the life of Leonardo da Vinci unfold like a quiet canvas in the night. Audiobook Dawn moved gently across the Tuscan hills, spreading soft gold over fields and olive trees. The world around Vinci stirred not with noise, but with a slow awakening. Mist floating above vineyards, dew resting on grass like tiny stars that refused to fade. In a small stone house near the village edge, a child opened his eyes to this quiet miracle every morning. His name was Leonardo, though no one yet knew how far his imagination would carry him. He would slip out silently, feet touching the cold floor, heart dancing with a curiosity that seemed older than he was. Outside, the air tasted fresh, washed by night brain. Birds greeted the world with delicate, uncertain notes. The wind moved through tall grass in long waves, as though the earth itself breathed. For Leonardo, these mornings were not simply the beginning of a day, they were invitations, lessons, mysteries waiting to be observed. He would watch leaves tremble at the slightest touch of air. He would follow ants carrying seeds many times their size. He watched sunlight appear on the mountains like a slow brushstroke, painting reality into existence. Even as a child, he did not look at the world. He studied it. He felt it. He wondered about it. And every small detail whispered to him about balance, about motion, about the hidden rules guiding everything around him. Leonardo did not attend a formal school like the sons of nobles. Instead, the hills, rivers, and forests became his teachers. He sat beside the same stream day after day, watching its flow. Where others saw only water, Leonardo saw patterns. The shapes currents made when they hit rocks, the hidden spirals beneath the surface, the reflections moving with light. He touched the water with his hands. What made it move? Why did it always take the easiest path? Why did it carve stone slowly, patiently? These questions filled his young mind like stars filling a night sky. He watched birds too, hours, sometimes entire afternoons. While other children chased them, Leonardo observed their wings, their angles, the way their bodies tilted before rising into the air. He imagined lines cutting through the sky, paths of motion too delicate to see unless one looked carefully. Every creature, every leaf, every ripple became part of a story he quietly collected inside his mind. Though surrounded by the peaceful beauty of Tuscany, Leonardo grew up on the edges of society. Born out of wedlock, he did not belong fully anywhere, not to the world of his father, a respected notary, nor to the simple life of the villagers. This separation made him quiet, made him observant. made him patient. He learned to watch more than he spoke, to understand more than he expressed. Often, he would sit alone under a walnut tree, drawing the world in the dirt with a stick. He sketched leaves with veins shaped perfectly. He drew birds with wings bent at angles only careful eyes could find. He traced the shadows cast by hills and wondered why they moved differently morning to evening. His mind was a universe growing silently, unnoticed by the people around him. Leonardo's earliest notebooks were not made of paper. They were made of memories, observations, thousands of questions that lived inside him. Why does light behave differently through glass? Why does smoke rise in spirals? Why do bats fly like shadows while birds fly like brushstrokes? Why does rain fall straight but rivers bend? These questions sparked visions. Visions sparked ideas. Ideas sparked dreams. He imagined wings humans could wear. He imagined machines that moved water through cities. He imagined bridges that could lift themselves, wheels that could turn endlessly, and paints that could capture light as if holding time still. The hills of Vinci were quiet, but inside Leonardo's mind, storms of creation were forming. Evenings in Vinci were soft. The sky washed itself in rose and purple, the sun slipping behind distant hills. Leonardo would sit on a wooden fence, watching cattle return home, listening to the faint voices of villagers settling into the night. He studied the changing colors of the sky. He followed the shapes clouds made in their slow drift. He listened to insects humming low music in the grass. Nature was not just something outside him, it became a part of him, a rhythm he understood instinctively, a teacher he would carry throughout his life, from Vinci to Florence, from Milan to France. And though no one knew it then, the quiet child with curious eyes was preparing to create works that would echo through centuries. Paintings that captured the soul of motion, inventive sketches that predicted the future, and observations that would shape both art and science. The world was shaping him gently, patiently, silently. Just as he observed the world observed him, preparing him for a lifetime of discovery. When Leonardo first entered Florence, it felt like stepping into a world carved from imagination itself. The hills of Vinci had been soft, quiet, and humble, but Florence rose like a city sculpted by giants. Massive stone towers lifted their sharp silhouettes against the sky. Bridges arched over the Arno River in elegant curves. Workshops, markets, and palaces lined the narrow streets like veins of a living body. Light fell differently here. It bounced from stone walls, filtered through arches, and deepened in the shadows of tall buildings. Leonardo watched everything. He watched workers pulling ropes in unison as they raised marble blocks. He watched merchants arranging fruit like colors on a painter's palette. He watched horses dragging heavy carts, their muscles shifting like living sculptures. Florence awakened something fierce in him, a hunger to understand not just nature, but human creation, human movement, human innovation. This was not simply a city, it was a masterpiece in the making. Leonardo's heart knew, even then, that this place would transform him. Leonardo entered the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, one of the greatest artists and craftsmen of the age. The room was alive with activity. apprentices grinding pigments into powder, others carving marble, others heating metal until it glowed like the sun. The air smelled of turpentine, hot iron, wet clay, and fresh wood. It was chaotic, but it was a chaos that created beauty. Leonardo, still a teenager, stood quietly in the corner. His eyes absorbed every movement: the flick of a brush, the curve of a chisel, the tilt of a sculptor's wrist. He studied the muscles of horses as they were drawn on parchment. He studied the flow of drapery, how folds formed where the fabric bent. Verrocchio noticed him, not because Leonardo spoke, but because he observed more deeply than any other apprentice. He saw that the boy did not copy movements, he understood them. He did not mimic forms, he found the rules beneath them. So Verrocchio began giving him harder tasks, mixing paints perfectly, drawing precise outlines, sculpting small figures, and sketching from real life. Each task Leonardo treated like meditation: slow, patient, focused. And soon, his lines became sharper, his forms clearer, his shadows softer, yet more expressive. The other apprentices watched him with quiet amazement, some with envy, some with admiration. Leonardo ignored all of them. He cared only about the work. Even as he learned painting, Leonardo's mind wandered everywhere. He poked at tools no apprentice dared touch. He studied gears, ropes, pulleys, wheels, anything that moved. He spent hours observing the way tools worked, how pressure changed angles, how motion followed invisible lines, how heat transformed metal. At night, when the workshop grew quiet, Leonardo stayed behind sketching machines no one had asked him to design. He drew water pumps with spiraled blades. He drew wheels that captured wind. He drew flying machines shaped like bat wings and bird wings. His notebooks grew thick with ideas, some impossible, some centuries ahead of their time, all born from a restless curiosity. Verrocchio found the sketches one evening. He stared at them silently. This was not the work of a regular apprentice. This was the mind of a thinker, a dreamer, a scientist who used art as a doorway to everything else. Leonardo apologized shyly, thinking he had done something wrong, but Verrocchio shook his head. He placed a hand on his shoulder. Leonardo did not need words to understand what it meant. Keep going. One day, Verrocchio began working on a large painting, The Baptism of Christ. He gave Leonardo a small part of the work, an angel standing beside Christ, just a tiny section, just a figure in the corner. But Leonardo painted with such gentle precision, with such soft shading, with such calm understanding of light and form, that the angel came alive on the canvas. Its face glowed softly, its hair curled delicately, its cloth draped like real fabric under sunlight. When Verrocchio saw it, silence filled the workshop. The master looked at the apprentice, and in that still moment, the world tilted ever so slightly, as though acknowledging a shift in destiny. According to legends, Verrocchio put down his brush that day and vowed never to paint again, for he knew the student had surpassed the master. From that day on, Leonardo's role in the workshop changed. He was no longer simply an apprentice. He was an artist, a thinker, a rising star in Florence. He studied shadows more deeply. He learned the delicate technique of sfumato, softening outlines like mist drifting across a hill. He spent long nights sketching human hands, not for beauty, but for structure, for motion, for meaning. He watched people in markets, memorizing the way bodies moved when they carried baskets, bargained loudly, or laughed softly. Every person became a study. Every movement became a lesson. The city was teaching him, and Leonardo was listening. By the time Leonardo reached adulthood, Florence already whispered his name. His drawings were unlike anyone else's. His sculptures held lifelike tension. His inventions showed impossible imagination. And yet, Leonardo remained quiet. He still walked through nature at dawn. He still studied light as though it were alive. He still sketched birds, water, clouds, dreams. Inside him, a storm of creation grew stronger every day. Art, science, engineering, anatomy, nature, movement, silence. Everything blended inside his mind like colors merging into a masterpiece. And the world was only beginning to see who Leonardo da Vinci was truly becoming. At book, Florence had shaped Leonardo, but Florence could not contain him forever. The city buzzed with politics, rivalry, artistic competition, and uncertainty. Work came, but not steadily. Opportunities opened, not fully. The world expected art from Leonardo, but Leonardo wanted to explore machines, anatomy, engineering, warfare, water systems, and the mysteries of nature. Florence saw him as a painter. Leonardo saw himself as a student of everything. He needed a place where ideas could stretch, where imagination had space to breathe, where a curious mind could wander freely. And that place was beginning to call him from the north, a powerful, ambitious city rising under Duke Ludovico Sforza, a city made of stone and steel, of soldiers and scholars, of ambition and innovation. Milan. Leonardo prepared an extraordinary document, not a painting, not a sculpture, but a letter. In it, he described not beauty, but possibility. He offered Milan war machines that could protect the city, bridges light enough to carry armies, cannons shaped to maximize power, armored vehicles shaped like giant shells, architectural plans, water systems, engineering marvels. And then, almost as an afterthought, and I can also paint. The letter was not the work of a painter. It was the manifesto of a visionary, a mind that saw beyond art into the bones of the world. When Duke Ludovico read it, he did not see a Florentine artist. He saw a weapon of intelligence, a tool of innovation, a person who could transform Milan. The invitation came swiftly. Leonardo packed his notebooks, those silent companions filled with dreams, and began the journey north. Travel in the 15th century was slow, deliberate, and quiet reflection. Leonardo's mule carried his belongings while he walked beside it, watching the changing landscape. The hills of Tuscany softened behind him. Forests thickened. Rivers widened. Villages changed in design and rhythm. He studied the architectural differences, the slopes of roofs, the construction of bridges, the irrigation of fields. The sky changed too, shifting from warm Tuscan gold to cooler northern grays. Leonardo sketched throughout the journey, sometimes stopping for hours to observe windmills, farm tools, or formations of birds flying overhead. The road to Milan became a moving classroom. Every step a lesson, every mile a meditation, every horizon an unopened book. When Leonardo finally entered Milan, the city felt enormous, a fortress of ambition, with high walls, armored soldiers, echoing workshops and markets filled with metal, wool,
leather, and iron. Florence had been a city of art. Milan was a city of power. Sforza Castle towered at the center, walls thick, gates heavy, towers rising like sentinels. Leonardo walked through the gates quietly, his cloak brushing the stones. His eyes moved slowly from iron cannons to the mechanics of drawbridges to the architectural strength of the towers. This was a place where inventions could live, a place where machines were not curiosity, they were necessity. The Duke received him not as a painter, but as an engineer, a thinker, a visionary. For the first time in his life, Leonardo felt seen for what he truly was. Leonardo's new studio, inside the castle, was unlike any workshop he had known. One table held brushes, pigments, and canvases. Another table held metal pieces, gears, ropes, cogs, and wheels. Another had models of bridges, fortifications, and architectural structures. And then there were the notebooks, always open, always waiting, always hungry for more observations. He worked on everything at once, painting portraits, studying human anatomy, designing water machines, planning enormous sculptures, creating stage designs for festivals, sketching weapons that would never be built, observing motion in soldiers, animals, and water. Days turned to nights, nights turned to long, quiet dawns. Leonardo scarcely slept, not out of pressure, but out of wonder, out of possibility. Milan had become a world where his curiosity could run free without fences. One of Duke Ludovico's greatest dreams was to honor his father with a colossal bronze horse, a sculpture so large that people would speak of it for centuries. Leonardo took on the challenge. For years, he sketched horses, not just their bodies, their motion, their bone structure, their muscles and tension. He watched soldiers' horses gallop across fields. He studied stable horses lifting their heads, pawing the ground, shifting weight from leg to leg. He filled page after page with drawings, sometimes tiny, sometimes large, sometimes with annotations about balance, symmetry, and weight distribution. Slowly, like a mountain rising from mist, the design began to emerge. A horse rearing, full of power, frozen at the moment of motion, capturing life in stillness. The clay model stood enormous, taller than a man, majestic and lifelike. Crowds came to see it. They whispered in awe. They had never seen creation like this. Leonardo felt a quiet pride, not in the praise, but in the realization that he had captured the invisible mathematics of motion. As years passed, Milan shaped Leonardo in ways Florence never could. The city gave him space to explore art and engineering equally. He painted musicians, nobles, and everyday people. He studied anatomy so deeply that muscles and bones became poetry to him. He imagined machines that would inspire engineers centuries later: helicopters, tanks, gears, submarines, calculators. He designed grand festival decorations that turned ordinary nights into magical worlds. And all the while, his notebooks grew heavier, filled with ideas that danced between reality and dream. Leonardo da Vinci had come to Milan as a talented young artist. He was becoming something far greater, a mind so vast, so curious, so ahead of his time that the world would spend centuries trying to understand him. The young Leonardo walked deeper into the world of learning, drifting through the streets of Florence as if carried by an invisible tide. Each morning rolled into the next with gentle rhythm, like the quiet turning of pages in a book no one else could read. His apprenticeship at Verrocchio's workshop blossomed into something far larger, a door to a universe made of lines, shadows, movement, and secrets hidden inside everything that lived. Inside the workshop, dust floated in shafts of pale morning light. Wooden mannequins stood still like patient guardians. Half-finished sculptures rested beneath cloth covers. Brushes soaked in bowls of clear water. The smell of metal, wet clay, and crushed pigments filled the air. Echoes of creation everywhere. Leonardo learned faster than time itself seemed able to follow. Other apprentices copied what they were told. Leonardo watched what the world itself was doing. He observed how light slid across a cheek, how air softened the edges of distant hills, how a bird flickered its wings before rising. Every day became a discovery. He watched craftsmen hammer hot iron into shape, and from that single act, he imagined machines with wings. He studied the curve of a horse's leg, and from that curve, he saw the motion of an entire army in his mind. He sketched faces of strangers on scraps of paper, capturing emotions even they did not know they held. His notebook grew thicker, filled with streams of thoughts that flowed like quiet rivers. Lines crossed lines, ideas slipped into new ideas. There were wings designed like bat skeletons, wheels that moved without horses, bridges that could fold, a diving suit of leather and tubes, endless shapes of gears that whispered of futures not yet born. Florence embraced him silently. Its narrow streets, tall buildings, and stone bridges shaped his imagination. He walked by the Arno River each evening, watching the fading daylight dissolve into gold across the water. The river moved with a calm patience that Leonardo admired. It reminded him that everything had patterns, even silence. He spent hours studying how water curled around stones, how ripples danced when touched by a falling leaf. These simple moments taught him more than any formal lesson. They showed him nature's secret language, a language he would spend his whole life trying to translate. Back in the workshop, Verrocchio worked on a great commission, a painting that required many hands. The apprentices mixed colors, prepared surfaces, and filled in details. Leonardo began with small tasks, but soon his gentle precision stood out. He did not just paint, he understood the world inside the paint. When he touched the brush to the canvas, something new appeared. Softness of flesh, shimmering light, breaths caught in stillness. Even Verrocchio paused to observe. Leonardo's technique was tender and patient. He built shadows like mist, layered highlights like morning dew. His world expanded further when he discovered anatomy. The human form fascinated him, not for glory or art, but for understanding. He drew arms and legs, muscles shifting beneath skin, hands that curled and opened like living sculptures. His sketches were not copies, they were true reflections of how the body moved. Florence's markets whispering with life became another classroom. He blended into the crowds, his eyes absorbing everything. Old men leaning on canes, children chasing each other, merchants waving cloth in sunlight, travelers with distant expressions. Each face carried a universe of stories. Each gesture carried a truth about life. His nights grew longer. Lamps burned low in his small room. Paper surrounded him like fallen leaves in autumn. Sketches of storms, mountains, flower petals, birds in mid-flight. He practiced shading until his fingers ached. He studied geometry, trying to understand the weight of angles and the balance of curves. He felt something shifting inside him, a sense that the world was larger than what the eyes could see. And he wanted to reach all of it. One evening, while walking through a quiet courtyard, he stopped beside a well. The air was cool, moonlight slipped across the stones. The calmness soothed him. He gazed at the sky, tracing constellations with his eyes, imagining machines that could carry a person to the stars. Florence became his cradle of wonders. Its beauty encouraged him. Its complexity challenged him. The city shaped him into someone who searched beyond the surface of things. He grew into a silent seeker of light, of truth, of nature's deepest mechanisms. People in the workshop began to notice his quiet brilliance. They spoke of the boy who could draw life with only a few strokes. They whispered about the strange notebooks filled with inventions no one else dared imagine. They admired him, but also kept their distance. He was different, gently, silently different. Leonardo felt no pride in this. He simply felt curious, endless curious. The world was a puzzle, and he wanted to understand every piece. In these years of discovery, his mind became both compass and map. He wandered through knowledge like a traveler in a foreign land, gathering treasures of thought instead of gold. And without realizing it, he had already taken the first steps toward becoming the Leonardo da Vinci the world would one day remember. Not through fame, not through power, but through the quiet fire of wonder that lived inside him. As he studied, sketched, and dreamed, Florence kept watching over him, a city unaware that within its streets, in a humble workshop lit by soft dawn light, a genius was quietly unfolding like a flower opening its petals to the sun. Florence entered a new season, its skies turning softer and its evenings brushing the city with long golden shadows. The bells from distant churches drifted through the air like gentle waves, and within Verrocchio's workshop, the young Leonardo stepped quietly into a new stage of his journey, the stage where his hands began creating works that carried whispers of genius. Days began with the familiar sounds of tools striking metal, apprentices stirring pigments, and the low murmur of focused voices. But the atmosphere around Leonardo shifted. The masters no longer saw him as just a student. They saw something blooming far beyond ordinary talent. Verrocchio received a prestigious commission, a painting for a wealthy patron, a work that would require many hands and many months. The workshop buzzed with activity. Canvases were stretched, wooden panels polished, colors mixed with careful precision. The composition depicted a sacred scene, figures bathed in soft light. Leonardo was assigned a portion of the painting, a small section meant to test his developing skill. As he prepared his palette, he paused, absorbing the light in the room. He watched how it touched the walls, how it softened edges, how it turned dust into tiny stars. Then he began. His brush moved slowly, deliberately, as if tracing the quiet breaths of the living world. Layer by layer, he built gentle shadows. He softened the lines until the figure on the panel looked as though it existed halfway between reality and a dream. He added delicate transitions of color, blending them so smoothly they seemed to dissolve into each other like mist on a river. Other apprentices stopped to watch. They had seen skill, they had seen discipline, but this was something else. Leonardo painted as if light itself answered to him. When Verrocchio stepped forward to examine the work, he stared in long silence. The portion Leonardo had painted held a softness, a depth, a sense of life the rest of the painting did not yet have. It was rumored, though history would later debate it, that Verrocchio, upon seeing Leonardo's angel in the panel, set aside his brush, saying he could no longer match the touch of his apprentice. Whether the story is myth or truth, one thing was certain: Leonardo's name began to whisper through Florence. But Leonardo remained unchanged by praise. Each morning he returned to the workshop with the same quiet curiosity. He practiced shading until the world looked different to him. He studied how light touched cloth, how skin curved gently around bone, how clouds formed layers in the sky. He began a series of small paintings, experiments really, where he tried to capture expressions, emotions, and scenes with a softness not yet common in art. Faces emerged from darkness. Landscapes faded like memory. Figures stood between shadow and light as if stepping out of a dream. He explored sfumato, a technique where edges blurred, colors melted, and forms breathed. No sharp lines, no harsh transitions, everything gentle, everything calm. At the same time, he worked on sculptures under Verrocchio's guidance. He shaped clay with slow, careful movements, feeling the flow of muscle beneath the surface. His hands understood anatomy intuitively, as though they had memorized the language of bodies. But not all of Leonardo's masterpieces were born of paint or clay. In his notebooks, the pages filled faster than ever. He drew flying machines shaped like birds, mechanical gears arranged in impossible harmony, devices that used water pressure, bridges that unfolded like paper. Each sketch carried the seed of an idea far beyond the time he lived in. He watched clouds drift across the sky and imagined devices that could navigate air. He observed fish swimming beneath the surface of the river and designed underwater breathing systems. Every moment of the natural world offered him a blueprint. Yet Leonardo still felt something missing, something he could not name. He painted, sculpted, sketched, studied, and dreamed, but an invisible distance lingered between his vision and the world around him. He walked through Florence in the evenings, moving silently through the narrow streets. Lantern light shimmered on stone walls. Traders packed up their stalls. Families lit lamps inside their homes. The Arno River glowed like a ribbon of melted gold beneath the fading sky. Leonardo often stopped on a small bridge, watching the water flow beneath him. The surface rippled gently, distorting reflections of clouds and towers. He studied the patterns, the slow currents, the swirling eddies. Water taught him motion. Water taught him patience. Water taught him that every force in the world could be understood if observed carefully enough. One autumn, Florence faced an engineering challenge, a problem with one of its canal systems. Water was overflowing into the streets, threatening markets and homes. The city officials sought ideas from craftsmen and engineers. Leonardo stepped forward quietly. He presented sketches, calm, clear, beautifully detailed, showing a system of barriers and channels to redirect the water. His proposal was simple yet brilliant, blending practicality with elegance. The officials were impressed by the drawings, but more impressed by the young man who explained them with such gentle confidence. The plan was not implemented, but it marked the first time Leonardo's mind for engineering was recognized outside the workshop. Back at Verrocchio's studio, Leonardo continued shaping his art. He began painting what would later be known as the Annunciation. Though still young, his touch created soft landscapes fading into pale horizons. The wings of the angel were crafted with meticulous attention to real bird anatomy. The scene felt calm, serene, and full of quiet light. He searched for perfection not through ambition, but through wonder. Every painting became a meditation. Every sculpture became a silent conversation with the world. Years passed like drifting clouds. Leonardo grew into a young man whose presence radiated both humility and brilliance. His hair grew longer, curling gently around his shoulders. His face remained calm, reflective, always observing. His hands moved with effortless grace, as though guided by something beyond human skill. But Florence recognized him now, the apprentice who worked like a master, the artist whose paintings carried dreams, the inventor whose notebooks held the future. But Leonardo himself remained restless. He sensed the world growing too small for the ideas inside him. Florence was beautiful but familiar. He longed for places that could challenge him again, inspire him again, widen the horizon of his imagination. He needed a new chapter. And soon, that chapter would come, a chapter that would take him to a powerful city, to grand courts, to military inventions, to royal patronage, to some of the greatest works he would ever create. But for now, in these early years, Leonardo stood at the edge of possibility, a young master discovering the vastness of his own mind, unaware that the world would one day call him one of the greatest minds in history. The light of Florence glowed softly around him. The future waited quietly. Florence glowed beneath a warm spring sky, but inside Leonardo's heart, a quiet restlessness stirred. He had grown from a curious apprentice into a young master, yet the city felt smaller now, not in its streets or buildings, but in the space it offered for his imagination. His mind was overflowing with visions: flying machines, great sculptures, hydrodynamic systems, musical instruments, new forms of architecture. Florence admired painters, but Leonardo wanted to be more than an artist. He wanted to explore every corner of knowledge. One evening, while walking through the quiet streets near the river, he paused on a stone bridge. Below him, the Arno flowed with a calm rhythm of something ancient. Reflections wavered on the surface: lanterns, rooftops, the faint glow of a setting sun. Leonardo leaned on the cool stone railing, feeling the wind brush past him. Something within him whispered of distant places waiting to be discovered, cities with different skies, courts filled with new challenges, patrons who sought more than paintings. He felt Florence slowly releasing him, like a familiar hand loosening its gentle grip. Opportunity arrived quietly, in the form of a rumor. The powerful Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza, was seeking engineers, architects, musicians, entertainers, and military designers. He wanted minds that could strengthen his city-state, minds that could build, invent, innovate. Leonardo listened, calm and thoughtful. Milan was a place where knowledge had room to stretch, a place where rulers appreciated both beauty and power, a place where a man could design machines, buildings, bridges, anything. Without noise, without fanfare, he prepared a letter. It was no ordinary letter. It was a masterpiece in itself, a list of skills written with quiet confidence. Leonardo did not emphasize painting at all. Instead, he described fortification designs, bridges that could be assembled quickly, machines that hurled stones, armored vehicles shaped like giant shells, systems of draining and flooding rivers, and instruments of music. It was a letter from an engineer, a thinker, a dreamer. Leonardo sealed it and sent it to Milan. Weeks passed like slow-moving water. He continued painting, sketching, and studying, but his thoughts drifted north again and again. Then one morning, a messenger arrived at Verrocchio's workshop with news. The Duke of Milan had read the letter, and he was interested. Leonardo stood quietly as the message was read. He felt no rush of excitement, only a deep, calm understanding. A path had opened, a chapter had begun. Florence would always be his home of beginnings, but Milan would be the home where his genius expanded. He packed his tools, notebooks, brushes, and instruments carefully. His belongings were few, but his mind carried the true weight. Thousands of ideas, unfinished experiments, visions of art and science intertwined like threads of silk. Before leaving, he took one last walk through Florence. The morning light warmed the stone walls. The smells of bread, fresh paint, and river mist filled the air. He passed the workshop where he had spent countless hours learning, shaping, dreaming. He paused outside the door, remembering the boy he had been when he first stepped inside, nervous yet hopeful. Now he walked away with a quiet strength. The journey to Milan was long. The road stretched across hills, valleys, rivers, and farmlands. Leonardo traveled with a small group of merchants, listening to the sound of horses' hooves and the wind weaving through tall grass. He sketched whenever something stirred him: a twisted tree trunk, an unusual cloud formation, a rare bird in flight. He studied everything. He breathed in landscapes like they were pages of a book. When the group reached the foothills near Milan, the air felt heavier, the land flatter, the horizon wider. The city emerged slowly. Tall walls, fortified towers, bustling gates. Sounds of markets and soldiers merged into a rich, powerful hum. Milan was larger, stricter, and more disciplined than Florence. It felt like a place built for ambition, a place where ideas became action. Leonardo entered through the main gate, passing guards in metal armor, carts stacked with goods, and citizens wearing the darker, thicker fabrics typical of northern Italy. The atmosphere was colder, but energetic, like a city holding its breath before a transformation. The court of Ludovico Sforza pulsed with life. Musicians practiced in courtyards, engineers tested strange mechanisms, architects displayed blueprints, artisans presented sculptures of marble and bronze, soldiers trained under the watch of commanders. Here, talent was not merely admired, it was used. Leonardo was led through grand halls, their stone arches decorated with patterns that cast soft shadows on the floor. Courtiers whispered amongst themselves, curious about the quiet man from Florence, with long hair, calm eyes, and a bundle of notebooks tied with cord. Finally, Leonardo stood before Ludovico Sforza. The Duke examined him silently. Leonardo's presence was gentle, yet he carried an aura of depth, a calm intensity that made others listen even before he spoke. When the Duke opened Leonardo's letter again, he seemed even more impressed. Leonardo spoke little, but his sketches said everything. Pages filled with elegant lines, geometric studies, complex machines, artistic compositions, and scientific observations. Each drawing radiated both imagination and clarity.
Ludovico saw in him not only an artist, but a mind that could change an entire city. And so, Leonardo was welcomed into Milan. His new home was a modest room in the castle complex. The walls were bare at first, but soon they filled with paper sheets pinned in careful rows. Sketches of anatomy, architecture, fortifications, water systems, horses, instruments, wings, gears, all arranged like fragments of a universe. Leonardo explored the city slowly. He studied the canals that crisscrossed Milan like silver threads. He observed its military architecture. He walked through its markets, gathering inspiration from fabrics, metals, plants, and faces. He felt Milan reshaping him. He worked for the Duke on many tasks, designing weapons, improving defenses, creating festival decorations, planning buildings. Some projects were built, many remained concepts, but Leonardo approached each task with the same quiet curiosity. At the same time, he began planning something monumental, a grand equestrian statue, a sculpture so enormous it would astonish the world. It would be made of bronze, towering above all who stood before it. He sketched horses endlessly, studying their muscles, their movements, their power. He visited stables, watching them breathe, watching them gallop. His notebooks filled with dozens of anatomical drawings. This sculpture, he believed, would be one of his greatest works. Milan also deepened Leonardo's relationship with music. He designed strange instruments with curved bodies and intricate strings. He played softly in the evenings, allowing gentle notes to float through his chambers like drifting fireflies. He experimented with geometry, studying proportions that would later shape his greatest artworks. He observed human faces with even more attention, noting the subtlest smile, the faintest shift in expression. Every moment in Milan became a step toward the greatness the world would one day recognize. Yet, Leonardo remained calm, humble, and full of wonder. He walked the castle gardens at sunset, watching the sky melt into pink and gold. The leaves rustled softly. Fountains whispered as water fell into stone basins. He studied the patterns in everything: the veins of a leaf, the curve of a flower petal, the spirals in shells. Milan was not just a city of power, it was a city of inspiration. And in this city, Leonardo began to transform, not just as an artist, not just as an inventor, but as a mind that connected every corner of knowledge. The quiet boy from Vinci was now standing at the threshold of his most extraordinary creations, the works that would define him for centuries, the ideas that would shape the world. And as another calm evening descended over Milan, Leonardo stood at his window, looking at the vast city beneath him, unaware that his journey was still only beginning. Milan unfolded before Leonardo like a vast, intricate tapestry, woven with power, ambition, elegance, and quiet shadows. The court of Ludovico Sforza, known to many as Il Moro, pulsed at the center of this tapestry. Inside its thick stone walls, life followed rhythms far different from Florence. It was a place of ceremony, strategy, and spectacle, and Leonardo, with his gentle step and thoughtful gaze, became one of its most unique figures. Each morning, the castle awakened slowly. Guards shifted positions along the battlements, their metal armor glinting faintly under the pale blue sky. Servants hurried through arched corridors, carrying water, fabrics, documents, and instruments. The courtiers, dressed in dark velvet and heavy silk, entered the great halls with soft, measured footsteps. Leonardo walked this world with quiet observation, carrying notebooks instead of weapons and brushes instead of political ambitions. Inside his chambers, sunlight filtered through a small window,
illuminating the scattered sketches on the floor. There were drawings of flying machines shaped like dragonflies, circular fortresses with layered defenses, bridges that folded like giant wings, and careful studies of human anatomy. His mind had no walls, everything connected. Ludovico Sforza valued such a mind. He summoned Leonardo often, sometimes to discuss festival decorations, sometimes to review designs for military machines, sometimes simply to view the strange and beautiful creations inside his notebooks. The Duke trusted Leonardo's calm judgment and admired his curiosity. In return, Leonardo studied the Duke with silent understanding, a leader balancing power and fear, ambition and fragility. One of Leonardo's earliest tasks was to create theatrical spectacles for the court. Milan loved grand celebrations, events filled with music, movement, costumes, and illusions. Leonardo embraced this work with deep joy. It allowed him to blend art, mechanics, light, and imagination. He designed rotating stages, moving scenery, flying contraptions, and fantastical creatures operated by hidden gears. When the court gathered in candlelit halls, these machines came to life, shimmering, gliding, transforming the room into a dream. The audience gasped, the Duke smiled proudly, and Leonardo felt a quiet satisfaction that something inside his mind had touched the hearts of others. Yet even amid the grandeur, Leonardo remained detached from court politics. He walked through the castle like someone wandering inside a dreamscape, always studying, absorbing, learning. His fascination lay not in status, but in nature, motion, beauty, and truth. He spent hours examining how fabric folded, how metal reflected candlelight, how musicians' hands moved over instruments. He observed everything with care. Even the city's pigeons became subjects of study. Their wings, the angles of their flight, the way they lifted into the air with a soft, powerful sweep. At the same time, he worked on more serious projects: weapons, fortifications, water systems, and architectural designs. While he preferred peaceful inventions, he understood the world he lived in, a world of rivalries, battles, shifting alliances. His mind embraced all possibilities, though his heart leaned toward harmony. The greatest task given to him, however, stood on a level beyond all others: the creation of a giant bronze horse, a monument to honor the Duke's father. It would be enormous, larger than any sculpture made in his time. Leonardo accepted the challenge with calm determination. He visited stables daily, sketching horses from every angle. He studied their muscles, the tension in their legs, the bend of their necks, the stretch of their hooves. He observed how they stood, how they breathed, how they carried their weight. At night, under candlelight, he shaped play with slow, deliberate movements. Dust settled on his hands as he refined the curves, the details, the strength of the animal. The clay model grew taller, grander, more lifelike. Leonardo poured his soul into it, a fusion of art and science, motion and stillness. As he worked, life in the castle moved around him like a calm river. Musicians practiced in distant rooms, their notes drifting through corridors. Noble families whispered plans of alliances. The Duke held meetings with advisors. Soldiers marched in steady formation. And outside, the city breathed its own rhythm. Markets bustling, canals glimmering, towers standing in watchful silence. Leonardo found peace within this mixture of movement and quiet. He often walked alone in the castle gardens during sunset. Long shadows stretched across the grass. The sky turned gold, then rose, then deep violet. Birds settled on branches. Fountains murmured softly as water fell into stone basins. Leonardo would stand still, watching the evening fade, absorbing colors and shapes into his memory. These gardens became his sanctuary, a place where ideas matured like growing seeds. He studied leaves, tracing their veins with his eyes. He observed flowers, noting how petals curled inward at night. He watched insects, fascinated by the mechanics of their tiny wings. Nature whispered its secrets, and Leonardo listened with patience. The Duke admired him for these quiet wanderings, calling him a man who saw everything. And indeed, Leonardo saw the world through a lens few others possessed, one that united art and science into a single vision. As months turned into years, Leonardo's presence at the Milanese court became indispensable. He was the artist who painted softly, the engineer who designed boldly, the musician who played gently, the thinker who questioned everything. But beneath all this, he remained a solitary soul, calm, observant, curious. He belonged everywhere and nowhere. The courtiers respected him but did not fully understand him. Soldiers admired his sketches but marveled at his lack of interest in war. Scientists saw his diagrams but could not follow the pathways of his thoughts. Aristocrats delighted in his spectacles but did not grasp the depth woven into each design. Only nature understood him completely. And so, Leonardo continued to move through the castle like a quiet force, not loud, not demanding, but steady and transformative. He spent long nights perfecting the clay model for the bronze horse. Its muscles seemed alive under candlelight. Its posture carried both power and grace. When completed, the model stood tall, higher than a man, a masterpiece waiting to be cast in bronze. Visitors from distant lands came to see it. Artists stared in awe. Courtiers praised it. The Duke was filled with pride. This creation represented the height of Leonardo's life in Milan, the merging of his curiosity, discipline, and imagination. But change was already stirring in the world outside. Whispers of conflict traveled through Italy. Political tension rippled beneath the surface of court life. Armies moved, alliances shifted. The peaceful world Leonardo cherished seemed to tremble. Though he did not know it yet, the bronze horse would face a fate unlike anything he had planned, and Leonardo himself would soon be drawn into a new storm of uncertainty. For now, however, Milan remained bathed in quiet golden light. Leonardo stood at the center of its brilliance, calm, gentle, observant, unaware that destiny was already turning the next page of his journey.
Leonardo's life was about to change forever. Florence, with its warm stone streets and quiet workshops, had shaped his mind. But now, the world beyond the city began calling to him like a distant drumbeat. New opportunities, new challenges, new dreams, all waited somewhere far from the familiar hills of Tuscany. And at the center of that call stood a powerful city, Milan. It was a place of towers and soldiers, of iron and politics, of music echoing through grand halls, a place where great ambitions were not just imagined, they were built. And ruling that city was a man hungry for power, art, and ideas. Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan. A letter full of possibilities. One morning, Leonardo sat at his desk, the soft light of dawn stretching across the floorboards. But he wasn't sketching, he was writing. He crafted a long, extraordinary letter, not just any letter, but a declaration of everything he could offer Milan. Inside, it described weapons more powerful than the city had ever seen, bridges that could be built and taken apart in minutes, machines that could reshape battlefields, great sculptures carved from mountains. and paintings that would bring honor to the Duke's court. But most importantly, he offered his mind. He promised invention, he promised brilliance, he promised endless curiosity. The letter was sent, carried across the roads and rivers toward the north. Days passed, then weeks, until finally a response arrived. The Duke wanted to meet the Florentine genius. Leaving Florence behind, Leonardo packed slowly, each item placed into his luggage with quiet thought. He said goodbye to the workshop that had shaped him. He walked through the familiar markets and streets, touching the walls as if the stones themselves carried memories. Florence had been a birthplace of his dreams. Now it was time to follow them. He mounted his horse and began the long journey northward, through forests, across rivers, past villages and hills. The wind carried the scent of pine and cold mountain air. Leonardo felt something stir in his chest. A beginning, a promise, a future that was opening wider than ever before. The gates of Milan. When he arrived at Milan, the city rose like a fortress of iron ambition. High towers reached into the winter sky. Soldiers marched through stone streets. Merchants shouted in busy markets. The sound of metal rang from blacksmiths' forges. Everything felt bigger, louder, sharper. Leonardo watched it all with quiet eyes. This was a place where ideas could become real, where powerful minds gathered, where rulers sought innovation, and where art walked hand in hand with politics. The Duke's court was a world of silk and steel, and now Leonardo was part of it. The first meeting. Inside the grand halls of the Sforza castle, torches glowed against polished stone. Leonardo entered, his simple clothes contrasting with the bright garments and armored guards around him. Then he stood before Ludovico Sforza. The Duke studied him. Leonardo did not bow nervously. He did not speak too quickly or too proudly. He simply met the Duke's eyes with calm strength, carrying the confidence of a man who had learned from every corner of nature. The Duke nodded. His words were simple. "We shall see what your mind can build." And just like that, the gates of Milan opened wide for him. A new life begins. Work began immediately. Leonardo entered a world filled with scientists, musicians, mathematicians, architects, and thinkers from every part of Italy. The Duke allowed him space, tools, time, and freedom, everything an artist could dream of. Leonardo looked around the castle and city, seeing possibility everywhere. In the grand architecture, in the machines used for war, in the uncut marble waiting for shape, in the young apprentices eager to learn, in the bustling energy of a city that never seemed to sleep. Milan was a place where his ideas could finally become real. His inventions, his paintings, his sculptures, his studies of anatomy and nature, his dreams of flying machines, everything found a home here. Leonardo had stepped into the center of history, and he was ready to leave his mark. Life in Milan unfolded like a vast stage, and Leonardo stepped onto it with quiet determination. The city was different from Florence, harder, louder, more restless. Soldiers marched through the squares, merchants negotiated prices in heavy voices, and the Duke's castle hummed with the rhythm of power. Yet in all that noise, Leonardo carried his own silence. His mind worked in gentle, steady waves.
observing, imagining, shaping new worlds. The Duke had hired him not just as an artist, but as an engineer, a creator of machines, a designer of possibilities. And Leonardo embraced that role fully. A workshop of wonders. Inside the castle, Leonardo was given a spacious workshop, tall windows for light, wooden tables for tools, shelves for models, cabinets filled with metal pieces, gears, rope, and parchment. It became a home for his imagination. Each day he spread out new sketches, blueprints for machines that had never existed before. Cannons that could fire more accurately, armored vehicles that looked like moving shells, bridges that folded and unfolded like wings, water machines that controlled flow and force, new designs for catapults and siege engines. The Duke wanted weapons. Leonardo gave him visions. He created not for war itself, but for the challenge, the mystery of how motion, pressure, and balance could reshape the world. His workshop soon filled with wooden prototypes. Small wheels turned, ropes carried weight, metal springs snapped into motion. Visitors from the court came to watch him work, amazed by the quiet Florentine with a storm of ideas inside him. The music of motion. But Leonardo wasn't only building machines. He was listening to the gears, to the flow of water and pipes, to the sound of tension inside a bowstring. To him, every machine was a musical instrument. Every invention had rhythm. The turning of a wheel reminded him of the elegance of a dancer. The rise of a lever felt like the lifting of a bird's wing. Even the echo of a hammer striking metal became part of nature's hidden symphony. In his notebooks, he wrote, "Motion is the heart of all things." In Milan, constantly moving, constantly shifting, was the perfect place for his study. The Duke's trust. Ludovico Sforza visited the workshop often. Though a man of ambition and power, he found himself strangely drawn to Leonardo's calm presence. The Duke admired discipline. He admired precision. But more than anything, he admired vision. Leonardo showed him machines that could defend the city, tools that could build faster, designs for grand equestrian monuments that would immortalize the Sforza name. The Duke saw greatness in him. And so, he gave Leonardo more responsibility. He asked him to design a massive statue of Ludovico's father, new festival celebrations, architectural solutions for city problems, and even scenes from musical performances. Leonardo was no longer just a visitor in Milan. He was becoming its creative soul. The city that learned to dream. The people of Milan began to recognize him too. They saw him walking through the streets with a notebook always in hand. Sometimes he paused by a canal to study the movement of water. Sometimes he stopped in a crowded marketplace to sketch a face. Sometimes he followed soldiers to observe how armor shifted when they marched. Children watched him with wide eyes. Merchants whispered stories about him. Apprentices dreamed of learning under his guidance. Slowly, Milan grew to respect him deeply. They didn't fully understand his machines or his studies, but they felt that something rare was happening inside their city, something that will be remembered. A mind that wanted more. Even with all the work, Leonardo's curiosity only grew stronger. Machines were not enough. Engineering was not enough. His eyes drifted towards new mysteries, the shapes of human muscles, the patterns of wind, the structure of plants, the depth of shadows, the curve of smiles, the secrets inside the human body. He wanted to understand life itself, from the smallest cell to the grand movements of the universe. And so, at night, when the city slept, Leonardo lit a single lamp and began new studies: drawings of anatomy, notes on water, early ideas of flight. The workshop that belonged to Milan now belonged to him alone, glowing softly in the darkness. The dawn of a new obsession. One day, as Leonardo examined a bird resting on a wooden perch near his window, he felt something stir inside him, something powerful and bright. The way the bird lifted its wings, the gentle rhythm of air beneath them, the lightness, the freedom. It filled him with wonder. And in that moment, Leonardo understood. He wanted to unlock the secret of flight. He wanted humans to rise above the earth. He wanted to turn the sky into a place reachable by imagination and skill. It would become one of the greatest obsessions of his life. The sky above Milan stretched wide and endless, a canvas of blue and drifting white. Leonardo often stood at the highest balcony of the Sforza castle, his eyes following the steady arc of birds soaring between the towers. Their wings caught the breeze with calm mastery, each movement purposeful, graceful, and free. He watched them not with envy, but with longing. For Leonardo, flight was not a dream. It was a question, a puzzle, a promise. The sky whispered to him every day, calling him to understand its secrets. And he answered with ink, paper, wood, and imagination. The first sketches of flight. Leonardo's notebooks began filling with strange shapes. Wide wings like giant bats, feathers drawn with mathematical precision, pulley systems that mimicked tendons and muscles, machines powered by the strength of human legs and arms. Each page revealed a new idea: gliders, parachutes, winged suits, wind measuring instruments. He collected them like treasures, placing his thoughts in perfect order. He studied how birds folded their wings when they landed. He observed how they lifted themselves with the sudden push of air. He measured angles and curves, seeking the geometry of flight. In gentle pencil strokes, he wrote, "Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward." Though he himself had never flown, his heart already lived in the clouds. A workshop turned into aviary. Leonardo's workshop slowly transformed into something unusual. Wooden skeletons of wings hung from the ceiling. Silk stretched across frames like pale skin. Ropes and levers dangled from beams. Gears and springs set next to feathers collected from markets and gardens. Visitors entered with curiosity and left speechless. Some believed Leonardo was building a strange musical instrument. Some thought he was crafting a giant toy. But those who knew him understood this was something far greater. This was a man attempting the impossible. Apprentices whispered excitedly. Courtiers shook their heads. The Duke himself watched with mild amusement. But Leonardo didn't need anyone's understanding. Only the skies. Tests in secrecy. Leonardo didn't dare test his early gliders near the castle. The Duke's court was full of gossip, and laughter could kill a dream faster than failure. So, He rolled to the countryside. Open fields, quiet valleys, and soft hills where the wind had its own voice. With a small group of loyal apprentices, he carried his machines. Light wooden frames, winged harnesses, silk sails stretched like bird wings. They tested them cautiously. Wings flapped but didn't lift. Frames bent under pressure. Harnesses were heavy, restricting movement. Designs broke, twisted, fell. But each failure taught him something new. Each mistake carved the path forward. Leonardo believed no idea was wrong, only incomplete. The wind study. More than anything, he realized one truth. To fly, one must first understand the wind. So Leonardo devoted days, weeks, months to studying air itself. He held strips of paper in breezes. He observed smoke rising from torches. He watched how dust lifted from the ground after footsteps. He invented new measuring tools, rotating cups to measure wind speed, devices to observe air pressure, models to test wing angles, calculations to understand lift force. The world thought air was empty. Leonardo saw it as a living force. In his notes, he wrote, "Air is a body. It can be moved. It can hold. It can lift." Slowly, the sky revealed its hidden principles to him. A new vision of the future. One quiet night, Leonardo sat by candlelight sketching a design more daring than any before. A flying machine with broad wings like a bat. A cockpit where a man could lie face down. Pedals connected to gears. Strings linking limbs to wing joints. The machine looked alive, as if it were waiting to rise, waiting to breathe. Leonardo paused, studying his own drawing. His candle flame flickered, reflecting in his thoughtful eyes. This was no longer just a machine. It was the beginning of a new age. A future where humans would rise into the sky. A future where the impossible would become ordinary. A future shaped by imagination. Leonardo leaned back and whispered to himself that the sky was not unreachable, only unexplored. He felt destiny's hand on his shoulder. A dream too big for his time. The truth was simple. The world wasn't ready for his ideas. The materials weren't strong enough. The science wasn't complete. The power of human muscles wasn't enough to lift such a machine. But Leonardo didn't know that yet. Even if he had known, he wouldn't have stopped. For him, the value of a dream was not measured by success, but by the pursuit itself. And so, as dawn crept through his workshop window, painting the wooden wings gold, Leonardo prepared for a new chapter of his life in Milan. A chapter filled with art, science, politics, and invention. He had tasted the idea of flight, and though he had far more to learn, one thing was certain. The sky would never stop calling him. Audiobook. Milan, with its stone towers and flowing canals, had become Leonardo's world, a place where his mind could stretch across art, science, and invention without restraint. Yet, even in the midst of success, there was a quiet tension within him. Leonardo sought not just to create, but to understand the essence of life itself. Every corner of the city offered inspiration, the subtle curve of a canal reflected in the sunlight. A horse galloping across the piazza revealed muscles in motion. The delicate arch of a bridge displayed balance, strength, and beauty. To Leonardo, nothing was ordinary. Everything held meaning, waiting to be observed, studied, and understood. The masterpieces begin. It was in Milan that Leonardo began producing works that would secure his place in history. He approached painting not as an act of decoration, but as a study of humanity itself. He experimented with light and shadow, softening edges with sfumato to make faces and figures breathe with life. He observed the tiniest flickers of expression, a faint smile, a shifting gaze, a fleeting gesture, capturing emotion in a way no one had before. He painted layers upon layers, allowing the figures to emerge gradually, like the slow revelation of dawn. One of his most ambitious projects was The Last Supper, a painting that required both technical precision and deep understanding of human interaction. Each apostle became a study in emotion: shock, sorrow, contemplation, devotion. The composition told a story in a single frame, capturing the tension and drama of a pivotal moment. For Leonardo, painting was more than art. It was science, psychology, philosophy, and devotion all at once. The intersection of art and science. Leonardo's mind never rested on one discipline. While his brush captured life on canvas, his hands shaped mechanisms, his eyes studied anatomy, and his notebooks filled with observations of the natural world. He believed every field of knowledge was interconnected. To study a muscle was to understand movement. To observe a bird's wing was to imagine flight. To sketch a river was to understand engineering. His notebooks were filled with pages of meticulous detail: skeletal structures and muscles of humans and animals, designs for bridges, canals, and mechanical devices, studies of wind, water, and the flight of birds, preliminary sketches for paintings often more detailed than the final works. Even when his machines or inventions would never be built in his lifetime, they were a testament to his ability to dream beyond the limits of the world. A man among men. At the Duke's court, Leonardo became indispensable. His skill, insight, and quiet presence earned the respect of courtiers, engineers, and scholars alike. Apprentices sought him for instruction, and visitors came from distant lands to glimpse his workshop, to see the machines and paintings of the man who seemed to know everything without speaking much at all. Yet Leonardo remained detached from the trappings of power. He observed human ambition, politics, and rivalry, but he preferred the calm discipline of study and creation. He moved through the court like a silent force, respected and admired, yet never entirely understood. Dreams of flight and the natural world. Despite his achievements, Leonardo never abandoned his obsession with understanding the natural world. In the quiet hours of night, he sketched winged machines and flying devices, studying the principles of lift, wind, and anatomy. He observed the movement of fish in canals, the flow of water in fountains, the arch of a bird's wings as it soared through Milanese skies. Flight became more than a curiosity. It was a symbol of freedom, a metaphor for the mind's ability to transcend limits. He pursued it not for fame, but because he believed that understanding the laws of nature could elevate humanity itself. The horse that would never rise. One of Leonardo's most ambitious projects was the massive bronze equestrian statue commissioned by Ludovico Sforza in honor of his father. Leonardo studied horses endlessly, their muscles, their movement, their energy. He created clay models and sketches of staggering complexity. Yet the project faced obstacles. The bronze intended for the statue was eventually repurposed for military purposes, leaving the massive vision incomplete. Still, the study itself was revolutionary, representing Leonardo's ability to merge art, engineering, and observation into a single vision. The mind that knew no bounds. By now, Leonardo's genius was recognized across Italy. He was celebrated as a painter, an engineer, a scientist, and a visionary. But for him, recognition was secondary. His joy lay in discovery, in observation, and in the silent act of creation. He sought the truth hidden in shadows, in light, in movement, in the patterns of nature. He wrote in his notebooks, quote, "He who loves practice without theory is like the sailor who boards ship without rudder or compass and never knows where he may cast." End quote. And so he continued, quietly, patiently, observing the world in detail, understanding its laws, and dreaming of the impossible. A city that shaped a genius. Milan was more than a city to Leonardo. It was a laboratory, a studio, a living canvas. The canals, streets, gardens, and skies became his tutors. He absorbed every sound, every movement, every shadow, and every light. In this city, Leonardo grew not only as an artist and engineer, but as a philosopher of life itself. A man who sought to understand all things, from the tiniest leaf to the vastness of the sky. And though Milan would one day fall into conflict and the projects he dreamed of would face obstacles, Leonardo's mind remained unbroken. His vision expanded quietly, infinitely, like the horizon at dawn. For Leonardo da Vinci, the world was both subject and teacher. And in Milan, he began to see the endless possibilities of the human mind. Leonardo's years in Milan had settled into a rhythm of observation, creation, and endless study. The city had become his laboratory, his gallery, and his sanctuary. Within the walls of the Duke's palace, he worked with quiet intensity, turning every idea, every sketch, and every study into something tangible, whether a painting, a machine, or a vision of the world's hidden workings. The Last Supper, a moment captured. Among Leonardo's greatest achievements in Milan was The Last Supper, a painting that captured not only the event itself, but the emotional undercurrents of that moment. Every apostle's reaction, every expression, every gesture was carefully considered. Leonardo studied human emotion with the precision of a scientist and the heart of a poet. He observed merchants, children, travelers, and nobles, noting how tiny shifts in posture or glance could reveal the deepest feelings. Then he translated those observations into his art. The dining hall of Santa Maria delle Grazie became a stage where movement and emotion converged. The Duke and the court watched in awe as Leonardo painted figures that seemed alive, suspended in a moment of human tension and divine presence. Even in progress, the work radiated life. Candlelight on the walls, the subtle flow of perspective, the soft gradation of light and shadow,
It was as if Leonardo had painted not just a scene, but the very heartbeat of humanity. Science in every stroke. Leonardo did not separate his art from his science. Every brushstroke reflected a study of anatomy, light, and proportion. Muscles, bones, and sinews appeared under skin in careful observation. Gestures mirrored the laws of physics and motion. He often returned to his notebooks while painting, cross referencing sketches of the human body, geometry, and nature. Every painting became a bridge between art and understanding, where observation and imagination coexisted. His studies of perspective, light, and geometry were meticulous. The folds of garments, the curve of a shoulder, the arch of a hand, all were measured, considered, and perfected. Through this synthesis of art and science, Leonardo elevated painting from craft to philosophy, invention, and experimentation. While he painted, Leonardo continued his engineering and scientific experiments. His workshop overflowed with wooden models, gears, and designs. Bridges, flying machines, water devices, and war engines filled every available surface. He sketched incessantly, noting even the smallest observations of nature. He studied birds, examining their wings and muscles. He measured water flow in canals. He designed tools and instruments to measure wind, pressure, and motion. Every object and phenomenon became a teacher, every moment a lesson. Even when some machines remained unbuilt, their designs showed an understanding centuries ahead of their time. His vision extended beyond Milan, beyond Italy, beyond the era he lived in. The horse that would not rise. Perhaps the most ambitious project in Milan was the giant equestrian statue for Ludovico Sforza, a tribute to the Duke's father. Leonardo studied horses endlessly, sculpting clay models that captured every muscle and sinew. The work represented both artistic mastery and engineering ingenuity. Yet, fate intervened. The bronze intended for the horse was redirected to make cannons during a time of war. The sculpture was never cast. Leonardo accepted this with quiet resignation. For him, the value lay in the process, the observation, the study, and the pursuit of perfection, rather than the finished product. A city that shaped a genius. Milan was a crucible for Leonardo's genius. Its canals, towers, gardens, and palaces provided endless inspiration. The people, their movements, their work, their expressions became subjects of constant study. Leonardo's fame grew, and he was recognized as an unparalleled artist, engineer, and thinker. Yet he remained humble, always observing, always questioning, always seeking to understand the principles underlying the world. At night, he would wander the city quietly, sketching stars, observing shadows, or listening to the wind through the streets and canals. In the solitude of the darkened city, his mind expanded endlessly. He dreamed of flight, of machines, of bridges, of perfecting the human form in art. He dreamed of a world where knowledge and imagination could meet in harmony. The next horizon. Although Milan had nurtured Leonardo's genius, the world beyond its walls was beginning to stir. Politics shifted, fortunes changed, and new opportunities arose in Rome, Florence, and eventually France. Leonardo knew his time in Milan would not last forever, but he had achieved more than most men could imagine. Masterpieces, inventions, and studies that would shape centuries. As he gazed at the stars over the quiet city, he felt the pull of new horizons. His mind already raced ahead, toward new cities, new patrons,
new challenges, and new creations. Milan had made him a master. The world awaited the genius he was yet to become.
The years in Milan had been filled with creation, observation, and learning. Leonardo had painted, designed, and studied tirelessly, leaving an indelible mark on the city and its people. Yet the winds of change were stirring. Political tension, shifting alliances, and the uncertainty of the Duke's court made the city feel restless. Leonardo, ever the observer of life, sensed that it was time to move again. He prepared quietly, gathering his notebooks, sketches, and the tools that had become extensions of his mind. Each item was a reminder of his journey so far, from the apprenticeships in Florence to the grand projects in Milan. The road to Rome and Florence. Leonardo traveled slowly, savoring the landscape as he journeyed. Hills rolled gently under the Tuscan sun, rivers mirrored the sky, and villages bustled with daily life. Along the way, he observed everything: the angles of rooftops, the flow of water in canals, the way children played with the simplest toys, the posture of animals grazing in the fields. Every detail was material for future study, every observation a lesson. Leonardo's mind never rested. When he arrived in Florence, the city welcomed him with its familiar warmth, yet it was a city changed from the one he had left years before. Political shifts and the rise of new patrons created a different atmosphere. Yet Florence was home, and here he found both comfort and opportunity. Rome, however, was a city of ambition and grandeur. Its churches, palaces, and fountains spoke of centuries of human achievement. Leonardo walked among them with quiet awe, studying architectural details, statues, and the flow of people through vast piazzas. New commissions and challenges. In Florence and Rome, Leonardo received commissions that tested both his artistic and engineering skills. He painted portraits, designed machinery, and advised on architectural projects. Yet he approached each task not as a chore, but as a puzzle, a study, an exploration of the underlying principles of nature and human creation. He experimented with new techniques in painting and sculpture, always striving for perfection. Light and shadow, perspective, anatomy, and emotion were all tools in his endless pursuit of understanding. He wrote, "The human body and the human mind are the greatest instruments of all. Study them, and you will see the world more clearly." His studies of anatomy became increasingly detailed. He dissected cadavers to understand muscles, bones, and organs, documenting every structure with extraordinary precision. These studies would not only influence his art, but also science for centuries to come. Flight and machines. Leonardo never abandoned his obsession with flight. In every city he visited, he studied birds, wind, and the principles of motion. He sketched designs for gliders, flying machines, and parachutes, imagining a world where humans could rise above the earth. He also continued to design bridges, canals, and mechanical devices, applying principles of physics, motion, and engineering with the same care he applied to his paintings. Even if some inventions could not be realized in his lifetime, they were seeds for future generations. A mind that bridged centuries. By this stage in life, Leonardo had become more than an artist or engineer. He was a thinker, a philosopher, a visionary. His curiosity spanned disciplines, uniting art, science, mathematics, and nature. He observed everything, recorded everything, and allowed his imagination to transform reality into ideas beyond its time. Yet, Leonardo never lost his calm demeanor. Even in the midst of fame, responsibility, and complexity, he moved through life with quiet patience, allowing observation and understanding to guide him. A glimpse of France. As his later years approached, he received an invitation from a foreign king, King Francis I of France. The offer promised new opportunities and a peaceful environment where he could continue his work free from the pressures and politics of Italian courts. Leonardo felt a quiet anticipation. Another journey awaited, a new horizon, another city, and new landscapes to observe, study, and inspire. Milan had shaped his genius. Florence had nurtured it. Rome had expanded it. Now, France would offer him the freedom to reflect, create, and leave a legacy for the world. And Leonardo, always calm, always patient, prepared once more to travel, carrying with him the cumulative knowledge of a lifetime, the sketches of countless observations, and the quiet, endless curiosity that had guided him since his youth. The sun rose over Florence one last time as Leonardo prepared for the journey that would carry him beyond Italy. His life in Milan and Florence had been filled with masterpieces, inventions, and endless studies. But a new chapter awaited, a place where he could work with quiet freedom, away from the political struggles of Italian courts. King Francis I of France had invited him to settle in Amboise, offering a residence and the opportunity to pursue his studies, paintings, and inventions without interference. Leonardo accepted, carrying with him a lifetime of sketches, notebooks, and designs, a treasury of knowledge that spanned art, science, anatomy, and engineering. Crossing the Alps. The journey north was long and demanding. Leonardo traveled with a small entourage, his notebooks carefully packed, brushes and tools stored safely. As he crossed the Alps, he marveled at the snow-capped peaks, rushing rivers, and quiet valleys. Each landscape offered new inspiration, new details to record, new lessons in nature's forms and forces. He observed how water flowed over rocks, how wind moved through pine forests, how shadows stretched over the mountains at sunset. Even the simple flight of birds over the valleys fascinated him, reminding him of the flying machines he had long dreamed to create. Leonardo's mind was alive with ideas, and even the vast mountains could not contain the expansiveness of his imagination. Life at Clos-Lucé. Upon arrival in France, Leonardo settled in Clos-Lucé, a grand manor near the royal palace at Amboise. The estate was quiet, with gardens, streams, and open spaces that allowed him to observe the natural world intimately. He spent his days painting, designing machines, studying anatomy, and reflecting on decades of work. King Francis I visited frequently, admiring Leonardo's intellect and charm. He treated the artist not merely as a servant or courtly talent, but as a trusted advisor and companion, valuing his insights across art, engineering, and philosophy. Leonardo moved freely, guided only by curiosity and the endless pursuit of understanding. The last masterpieces. Even in his later years, Leonardo continued to create. He refined paintings and sketches, completed studies, and explored new techniques in art. His notebooks from this period include designs for flying machines and parachutes, bridges spanning rivers, hydraulic systems to control water, anatomical studies of humans and animals. Though some of his inventions would never be built in his lifetime, each design reflected a deep understanding of nature and physics, a mind centuries ahead of its time. Reflection and observation. Leonardo spent many quiet hours walking in the gardens of Clos-Lucé. He observed the movement of water and fountains, the flight of birds, the sway of trees, and the subtle gestures of people passing through the estate. Each detail was a lesson, each observation a story. He reflected on his life with calm satisfaction, knowing that he had pursued knowledge,
art and invention with integrity and curiosity. Fame, wealth, and politics mattered little to him. What mattered was understanding the world and recording its truths for those who would follow. The mind that never rested. Even in his final years, Leonardo's mind remained sharp and active. He continued writing in notebooks, sketching ideas, and refining designs. He corresponded with patrons, thinkers, and scholars, sharing insights across Italy and France. Though his body grew weaker with age, his imagination remained limitless. Birds in flight, the flow of water, the bending of light, all continued to captivate him. He lived fully in observation, discovery, and creation until the very end. A legacy etched in time. Leonardo da Vinci passed away at Closey in 1919, surrounded by quiet gardens, flowing water, and the works of a lifetime. He left behind paintings that captured the human soul, notebooks filled with inventions far ahead of their time, studies of anatomy, engineering, and natural science, a legacy of curiosity, patience, and observation. His life was a testament to the endless pursuit of knowledge, the merging of art and science, and the quiet power of a mind that never ceased to dream. Even as centuries passed, Leonardo's vision continued to inspire the world. A reminder that curiosity, observation, and imagination can transcend time itself. The years after Leonardo's death would see the world slowly catching up to the brilliance he had lived. Yet in his final days at Closey, Leonardo seemed almost timeless, as if he already existed beyond the limitations of a single lifetime. Even in silence, he spoke through his works. Paintings glowed with emotion, sketches revealed machines that had never been built. Anatomy studies captured life in microscopic detail. Every stroke, every diagram, every note was a conversation with the future, a dialogue that centuries would eventually understand. The language of observation. Leonardo had lived as a student of the world. Mountains, rivers, birds, and humans were all teachers. In his notebooks, he wrote quietly, recording the patterns of light and shadow, the behavior of air and water, the curvature of muscles and the flight of wings. His genius lay not only in creativity, but in perception. He saw what others overlooked. A falling leaf, a glance, a ripple on a pond, all were lessons, all were stories waiting to be understood. He believed that knowledge was a bridge between imagination and reality, a key to understanding the universe, and through his meticulous observations, he had built that bridge across centuries. The art that lives forever. Leonardo's paintings became immortal. Works like the Mona Lisa captured subtleties of expression that no other artist had attempted. Her faint smile, shifting and mysterious, mirrored the complexity of human emotion itself. The Last Supper captured a moment in time, every apostle's reaction frozen in perfect equilibrium, a symphony of emotion, motion, and story. Even unfinished works carried meaning, each layer revealing a mind constantly refining, questioning, and dreaming. Through these works, Leonardo communicated across time, speaking to generations who would never meet him but would feel the depth of his vision. The machines of a dreamer. Leonardo's inventions, too, were remarkable. Though many could not be built with the technology of his era, they revealed principles that modern science would later uncover. Gliders and aerial machines, anticipating human flight, bridges and hydraulic systems, anticipating engineering breakthroughs, anatomical studies influencing medicine centuries later, devices for war and peace, showing the duality of human endeavor.
Each invention was a reflection of a mind that refused limits, a mind that observed, imagined, and calculated simultaneously. His designs were not just machines, they were extensions of thought, dreams made visible on paper. A life of endless curiosity. Leonardo's life had been quiet yet boundless. He never sought wealth or titles. He did not crave power or fame. His joy was discovery. His pleasure was understanding. He moved through Florence, Milan, Rome, and France with calm patience, absorbing the world. Children watched him sketch, apprentices followed him, patrons admired him, yet he remained dedicated to observation and creation. He wrote, "Learning never exhausts the mind," and indeed, his mind never rested. From the tiniest insect to the vastness of the heavens, Leonardo sought to understand all things, and in doing so, left a map of wonder for all who followed. The quiet impact. Long after his death, the world would recognize the magnitude of his vision. Artists learned from his techniques. Scientists discovered principles hidden in his notes. Engineers found inspiration in his sketches. And philosophers pondered the mind that saw connections across disciplines in ways no one else could. Leonardo da Vinci became more than a man, he became a symbol of human potential, a reminder that curiosity, patience, and imagination can leave echoes across centuries. A Night Under the Stars. If one could imagine Leonardo at rest, one could picture him at Clueless, gazing at the night sky. Stars stretched endlessly across the heavens, the wind whispered through trees, water shimmered in fountains, birds slept quietly in the gardens. He might have smiled faintly, imagining the mysteries still waiting to be discovered. A lifetime of observation, creation, and study had brought him here, and yet he knew the universe was infinitely larger than any one person could explore. In that quiet, under the stars, Leonardo da Vinci became eternal, a mind that lived beyond time, a dreamer whose curiosity would inspire the world forever.